Every success is worth savoring. Celebrate with Glenfiddich, the world's most awarded single malt Scotch whiskey. Find Glenfiddich near you at glenfiddich.com. Unmatched legacy, extraordinary taste. Drink Glenfiddich single malt Scotch whiskey responsibly. Copyright 2024. Imported by William Grant & Sons, New York, New York.
Meet Brex, the world's smartest corporate card. Brex cards help 25,000 companies control spend before it happens, automate manual work, and earn more. With Brex, you can make every dollar count effortlessly. Learn more at brex.com/grow. Over 38,000 businesses have future-proofed their business with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR into one platform. Download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/inc.
I'm Inc. Executive Editor Diana Ransom.
And I'm Editor-at-Large Chrsitine Lagorio-Chafkin.
This is From the Ground Up.
Today's episode, Year in Review.
For our last episode of the season, we brought in Inc. Senior Editor Tim Crino and staff writer Sarah Lynch to talk over some of the biggest business news topics from the year.
Yes, we talked about the many, many layoffs in the tech sector. We talked about DEI backlash and generational workplace warfare. Also, in the aftermath of the election, we just had to talk about some of the hot-button topics for 2025, like Trump's proposed tariffs, the new wave of the crypto economy. I'm calling it that now. I'm calling it that. And, things we also talked about things we generally feel optimistic about.
But we started the conversation by reflecting on the changes that have taken place right here at Inc. So, Christine, we wanted to start off this show by talking with you a little bit about what are some new changes at Inc. What have we witnessed this year?
Yeah, the updates from the Inc. world. We've actually had several big changes at Inc. I think first it's worth mentioning we have a new editor-in-chief, Mike Hoffman, and he's been here most of the year now. Is that right? Half the year,
right?
And I think it's been a tremendous
long-standing anchor.
Well, he was an anchor back a decade ago, maybe. And so he knows the brand through and through. He had been a writer and an editor and kind of created the website as we know it now at Inc. And now he's back. So he's been a great asset to us editorially in helping us hone our coverage. We also, if you notice that we sound better and maybe are more relaxed, it's because we have a new podcast studio and we are in it right now.
We're in it right now. We love it.
To us too. Yeah,
it's great. It's black.
It's black. Yeah, the walls are black. I didn't really notice
seat chairs and ladders.
It's a large padded room, so I feel comfortable.
There's stuff for everybody here.
And it's been our first full year of this From the Ground Up podcast, Diana. So it's been a pleasure working with you on it.
And you, Christine. Thank you.
Yeah. I think the big notable thing for me sort of in our world and what we cover and editorially was the Inc. 5000 this year. Mm-hmm. That's our list of fastest growing companies that are at least 3 years old. Some of them had like really, really crazy revenue. I mean, they all had crazy revenue growth. Some of them had crazy revenue. And, being at the conference this year kind of taught me something. Let me tell you a few of the highlights from the list, though. These companies are any kind of business across sectors. We had, the viral no-tie shoemaker Kizik was on the list. Mm-hmm. Coterie Diapers, a better baby diaper, was on the list. There was a company called Manhole Covers Direct.
Of course.
It's everything.
Love that.
Under
Best name ever.
Yeah. Some of the trends I think we saw were these luxury kind of doing something but a little better and oftentimes a little higher end. We also saw lots of trends in influencing. There was a company that makes software to make you look your best. We had a story about how Bloom Nutrition, which was on the list, saw a boom based on an army of TikTokers supporting their brand. But I do think the biggest trend we saw was in healthcare and services for health, such as an AI tool that fixes a problem with prescriptions. There was a company that has kind of reinvented the HSA. And the company that I wrote about for the Inc. 5000 was the fastest growing company in the country. It was called Vitalize Health, and it's kind of a middleman between the government and private practices, trying to make healthcare more efficient, especially for our aging population. You'll hear the phrase value-based healthcare a lot. And the way this company approaches it is by trying to get seniors in to see their doctors more often, to try to get private practices to actually just interact more with their patients,
Sort of
which
more,
is so cool. Yeah.
More with preventative care.
Exactly.
It's very important as people age, too.
Absolutely. Also, at the Inc. 5000, I met a company that does, they're a law firm based out of Minnesota, and they've pivoted strictly to doing elder law. I mean, I think that just shows there is the silver tsunami is here. It's coming, it's here. And a lot of companies are booming that serve our aging population. So also at the Inc. 5000, I guess I wanted to say, this has been a year of extreme kind of volatility in the labor market, which we will talk about, insecurity amongst workers, which we'll also talk about. But at the Inc. 5000, did you guys feel that? I kind of didn't feel that very much.
It's entrepreneur prom in a sense, and people are very, celebratory in a very sort of happy mood, generally speaking. I definitely got the vibe that people were doing well and they were ready to celebrate.
Right.
That.
And these are, of course, the companies that are succeeding and had a good year this year, had a good few years. But I do think these anxieties generally creep in and we generally can feel them. So I don't know, just going on vibes alone, I would say the forecast there, anything to take away from it is I think this next year is going to be really exciting. People are kind of excited to see, okay, is the flow of funding going to loosen up a little bit? Are some of these insecurities about the labor market going to loosen up a little bit? And I definitely was feeling that sort of excitement.
I think what's really interesting about this year's Inc. 5000 crop, and we've talked about this as a staff, were that these 3 years of revenue growth, which got these companies on the Inc. 5000, were all in the aftermath and in the midst, really, of COVID. For some companies, that led to huge growth, huge success. And then coming out and things started to normalize again, trying to figure out how their growth was going to sustain, be maintained is something that I feel a lot of the companies I spoke with at the 5000 were really reckoning with.
Yeah, and maybe that sort of adds to the vibes, people felt like they'd been through the worst.
Yes. But now what is our new normal?
Yeah.
I mean, and they were ready to party. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a sight for sure. It's definitely a scene too. So one trend that's been on my radar is the tough time Gen Z has been having. Folks are getting laid off in high numbers, a lot more than we've seen in younger generations than in the past. And we had Simon Sinek on the podcast recently where we talked about this tough time Gen Z is having. And he actually had a counterpoint suggesting that it's not really Gen Z's fault. It's actually managers are the problem. And managers are not necessarily stepping up to the plate in a way that younger folks might need.
Companies are upset with how employees are performing. Can we blame generational differences? Sure, that's a component, but that can't be the whole reason because there's a relationship at foot here. And at the end of the day, it's the people in charge that have more authority anyway to fix the ship. I can't ask a 22-year-old and an entire generation of 22-year-olds to get their shit together so that this company can work well. I think the people who've had more experience and have more authority can take the lead. Now, is there responsibility from the younger generation? Of course, they have to step in and play the game as well. If we're going to ask you to take yourself on and help you, then I expect you to take yourself on and ask for help. And if I show patience, I expect you to do the same. But I think companies bear more responsibility than they're taking on.
Tim, can you speak to this? We ran a story that showcased some of these troubles that I'm alluding to. What happened?
Yeah, I think, not to pat ourselves on the back, but that story got a lot of attention, which I think to me indicates that this is something on many people's minds. But I think the long and short of it is Gen Z is having sort of a tough time adapting to the workplace. I don't think that's news. What's new is that their managers or the people who employ them are getting sick of it.
And what are they getting sick of?
That's a good question. So I think what it really comes down to is a values mismatch, number one. Gen Z is a fiercely independent. Sarah, I think you can agree, being a member of the cohort.
Yes, that's Gen Z representative.
Wait, are you officially Gen Z?
I am.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
You're so mature.
Do you have a badge?
No
I'd
offense
be like,
to
I am
other,
Gen Z written across my face. I'm blending in today. I'm blending in.
Yeah. So, I think what it really comes down to is, like as you said, as Simon Sinek said, there's an issue with managers and there's an issue around expectations on both sides. This is a dynamic that's being co-created both by the Gen Z employees and their, millennial and Gen X and boomer managers. The long and short of it is each generation has a different set of values, right? Mm-hmm. So, Gen Z they're fiercely independent. They're very justice oriented. They are just not as into putting their nose to the grindstone and working for no reason, right?
Right.
They're hard workers. They work hard, but they need direction.
But are you having conversations like, come to work at 9? You need to come to work at 9 a.m. and then you leave at 5. You know, like that's the kind of remedial conversation people say they're having.
Right. And that's where it goes back to the values mismatch, right? It's like Gen Z tends to think that, I think one thing from that article that really stood out to me was one of our sources said, and she's an expert on, or she runs a coaching business for Gen Z. But one of the things she said is, Gen Z, they sort of came of age during the pandemic, which means they went to college on Zoom, and they didn't get the same socialization that generations before them got, right? Like college is where you learn to talk to adults, right? Or it's where you learn to deal with people and cooperate with people who don't share the same values or perspectives as you. And so I think Gen Z ultimately is a little rigid, but they also are almost in a state of freeze and flight where they want to do a good job, but they lack direction, and I think they lack the intuition, and they almost sort of lack the social language to ask for help in a way that would provide it. And then on the flip side of things, Gen X and boomers, I think, are inclined to sort of expect the people they manage to guess what they want a lot of the time, sort of fill in the blanks, to just, keep pitching, right? Like even in our industry, right? It's like, just pitch something to me until I can say yes to something. What's new and what millennials managers have kind of, I think, started to pioneer is this sort of shift towards, okay, I'm going to give you more direction. I'm going to create structure. I'm going to have those feedback conversations on an ongoing basis, and not, once every 6 months, because as we all know, like nothing should be a surprise in a performance review.
Right.
Ultimately, what it really comes down to is feedback, right? Gen Z needs feedback. They do expect to be parented a little bit more than their predecessors. And that's a level-setting conversation that needs to happen, right?
Well, I think what you were saying in that article is that is happening, sure, but it's not happening enough, right? And so folks are getting laid off in surprising numbers.
Exactly. And if you follow the thread, another sort of thing we've discovered this year is middle managers are burned out, almost at the same percentage that Gen Z is getting fired, right? If you're running a company, you have to support your middle managers. You got to give them the resources. And what that looks like is help them prioritize their plates, right? And then teach them how to do the same thing for Gen Z, for their employees. So the priorities need to flow from the top. The structure needs to be there. And I think it's also important to be realistic, right? Because millennials, and this is where it goes back to the values mismatches, millennials, I think, were more willing to just work, regardless of whether or not not to quote a Rihanna song, but regardless of whether or not it made sense. And now Gen Z is asking the question, is this meaningful work? Does this make sense? Is this a good use of my time? And it's a fair question, right? Don't you? Right. I mean, I think it's right, Sarah, like it's good to have.
Yes. And it's interesting how the two are connected, Tim, too. Gen Z is feeling disillusioned from their work, and it's actually making them not want to become managers and move up in their companies. That came up in my coverage recently, this trend of conscious unbossing from Gen Z.
Oh, yeah.
Which is super interesting.
Yeah, what is that?
It basically means that they don't really want to become managers. And
Which
why?
they're unbossing themselves.
They're unbossing themselves. Exactly, Christine. And the reason why is they believe that management kind of role is, quote, too high stress and low reward. But from what we're seeing in the kind of surveys that you mentioned, Tim, it's kind of true. Managers are overwhelmed right now. They're on the front lines of RTO mandates, if your company is instituting those. They're on the front lines of incorporating AI into their teams, if that's a mandate that they are called upon to do. They have a lot going on right now. And Gen Z, in addition to being motivated to work hard, but maybe not for whatever the company decides is a priority, is deciding, I'm out.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I feel like I've felt the same way throughout my career.
I can understand that, too.
Are you also Gen Z, Christine?
Well, certainly burned out. But it speaks to the idea of like doing something you love. And if you're not doing something you love at the end of the day, what is the point?
Yeah. I mean, it's just like a mismatch of the ideals and the job, right? I think millennials were able to either pick a career they loved or say, I work these hours, I play these hours, right? There's no, for Gen Zers, I feel like it's a little bit of a like not doing that mental
they're
gymnastics.
just not taking the pill. They're not like the red pill, blue pill, or whatever.
I do think they've taken it too far, though. I have, over the last 8 years I've been at Inc., managed almost 100 interns.
And damn, that's a lot.
I counted. I did. I went back and I counted. I was like, how many? I mean, I guesstimated, but it's close to that. Something I really have seen in recent years is I've noticed two different kinds of Gen Z interns. Like, one is, tell me what you want me to do. I'll do it faster and better. And like, I really want this job. Like, I'm doing 10% more. And then there's the Gen Z cohort that is sort of like, work feels optional. Like, it's just not the vibe today. Sometimes it's like fun to watch, and sometimes I'm like, no, I get it, girl. Like, it's
right.
not. It is not the vibe. Yeah, but one cannot live on vibes alone.
Can that vibe-based employee like actually do better?
Well, the question is like, how do you manage them? How do you manage a vibe-based employee? Are they adding value, even though you have to learn to sort of communicate with them or motivate them in different ways?
Well, yeah, that's what Simon was saying. He was talking a lot about like inspiring your team and being a little bit more respectful of their different values and their perspectives, and just being a little bit more accommodating. But at the same time, inspiring them to work harder or inspiring them to be what you think they can be.
Number one is give them something to believe in. Just like a car doesn't exist just to buy gas. A car exists to go somewhere, and gas is the fuel to go somewhere. And the reason we like getting in the car is because we're excited for the journey of the place we're going to go. Well, if a company is a car, a company doesn't exist simply to make money. Money is a fuel. Money is a fuel to go somewhere. And give people some sort of excitement that they're going to join your company and go somewhere, see something, do something, contribute to something. Give them a reason to come on board. Give them a reason to work hard. Give them a reason to work late beyond simply more gas. So I think most companies lack clear vision. And you can easily tell, just go look at the vision statements on their websites or their purpose statements. And their vision statements say something like, to be $1 billion company by 2030 or something, which is not a vision. And it's only relevant to the people who are going to profit off of that. So give people something that they contribute to that will leave this planet, this company, the society, the people you work with, your customers, somebody in better shape than you found them.
Exactly, yeah. And I've personally found anecdotally, like, if you tell them what's in it for them, and you kind of give them things that are both company priorities, but also something that's suited to their interests, it works, right? Like, I used to sort of kind of force the issue when it came to, we are a business publication, we write about business, you should be able to cover a broad depth of that and get into the weeds. And there are just some interns that are like, I want to write about climate change, or I want to write about brat marketing, or I want to, and if you let them do it and you coach them on that, and you're like, okay, that's going to be your thing, but you're going to do that thing really well, it works.
But you know, it's that idea of inspiring instead of just saying, I told you so, actually came up in the story that our colleague Ben Sherry wrote about the Inc. 5000 survey with CEOs. And they shared that inspiring their employees, their Gen Z employees in particular, instead of using fear tactics, was really working out for them. So just saying the highest growth companies are doing it, and it seems to be working well.
Yeah, no, it's not like, a bad idea.
Yeah, like Monsters Incorporated, right? Like, laughs are more powerful than scares.
Oh, that's
so true.
Such a sweet movie.
That's so inspiring. I love it.
But it was a tough year, even among the stalwart companies.
Yeah, Diana, since 2022, so in the past 2 years, more than 500,000 tech workers have been laid off from the biggest tech companies.
500,000?
500,000. Isn't that crazy? Meta, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Intel, and many, many other companies, but ones that you know their names. Like, that's wild. There's been a huge shift. There's been, the integration of AI into everything. There's been some Gen Z-based layoffs. There's been, departmental shifts. So 500,000 tech workers. We had a great story in our magazine by our freelance writer, Izzy Lepowski, about this. It was called Rebounder Founders. She spoke with one former Twitter employee named Alfonso Terrell, who had returned home from, Twitter's LA office in November of 2022 and realized he was locked out of Slack.
Oof.
He realized
So he didn't even know.
Yeah.
I actually have nightmares about that.
The news was sort of circulating. Like, half of Twitter's 7,500 employees had been laid off. It was, around, they knew Musk was
Twitter,
coming in.
You kind of knew.
Exactly.
That's
they
an
knew
anomaly.
it was.
Yeah.
And, Musk shortly thereafter was issuing these ultimatums to employees. I mean, it was a very tumultuous time was coming.
Do you think that set the tone for other tech leaders to do layoffs?
Interesting. I mean, I think that brazen sort of sudden, it was kind of seen as attacking, right? Like attacking the workforce. And I don't think that Musk is that much. I mean, he sort of stands apart from a lot of how normal companies operate, right? And should. But I do think that, these sort of ultimatums that we're seeing the Bezos, Musk issue saying, hey, you have to be in the office 5 days a week, or here are your new expectations as a worker. I think that those do somehow, like, yeah, I mean, it
the veil
doesn't always go well,
Yeah.
but I think some leaders do take that as, hey, I have the liberty to do this now, right? Like there's a precedent set. And I don't know. I mean, I think that each company needs individual kind of attention and consideration here. They shouldn't necessarily see that as their precedent, but sure, I think you're right.
And I also wonder if it's like if this downsizing in tech sort of needed to happen on something. Like maybe there was a lot of fat to trim.
Oh, sure. There was the right sizing of the operations that they were doing. You know, maybe they overhired during those periods of
prosperity.
High growth,
And those periods of venture capital just flowing and flowing and flowing. I was just speaking with Kevin Ryan, who is, the founder of AliCorp. He's a VC now, but he co-founded Guild Group,
Business Insider,
many, many companies. He's seen as kind of this godfather of New York City tech. And he said, I was asking him about, to predict the future of funding for next year. And he was like, I don't know. I can tell you that from the past years, not every company deserved that much money. Maybe there's a right sizing that is happening. And I do think that a lot of the larger companies kind of were doing the same adjustments over recent years.
What did Von Strel end up doing?
He, unsurprisingly, ended up founding a new company. If you read this piece, which is fantastic and everyone should read it, it's on Inc.com. A survey of laid-off tech workers found that 63% said they started companies after being laid off.
Oh, my goodness.
So these tech workers that are unemployed now are starting companies, right? This is a little bit of a bright lining to the bad news of the past couple of years. We're seeing a real boom in startup activity, a lot of tech startups. They're now self-identifying as founders after getting booted.
I love the silver lining to that particular negative experience. When we come back, Inc. staff writer Sarah Lynch tells us all about this past year's DEI backlash. But first, a quick break.
Every success is worth savoring. Celebrate with the extraordinary smooth taste of Glenfiddich, the world's most awarded single malt Scotch whiskey. Glenfiddich offers exclusive white glove concierge services. Let real personal assistants add a human touch to your corporate gifting, private event, tasting, or other hospitality needs. Simply contact concierge at glenfiddich.com. That's concierge at glenfiddich.com. Unmatched legacy, extraordinary taste. Drink Glenfiddich single malt Scotch whiskey responsibly. Copyright 2024. Imported by William Grant & Sons, New York, New York.
Have you heard about Brex? It's the world's smartest corporate card. Finance leaders love it because it's got powerful controls and rewards that help them make every dollar count. Here's why Brex cards are so smart. You can embed your expense policy inside the card. This lets you control employee spending before it even happens. Brex cards also automate manual expense tasks like receipts, memos, and reviews. So you're freed to focus on optimizing your company finances. Over 25,000 companies take every dollar further with Brex. Join them at brex.com/grow. What does the future hold for business? Can someone invent a crystal ball? Until then, over 38,000 businesses have future-proofed their business with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR into one platform. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're able to peer into the future and seize new opportunities. Speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/inc. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/inc.
Speaking of negative experiences, Sarah, you've done a lot of reporting on the basically the backlash of DE&I programming. Can you kick us off? Tell us what's happened this year.
Yes. So I think to talk about this year, we have to briefly go back to 2023. That's when in June, the Supreme Court ruled on affirmative action. It was overturned. That unleashed basically a flurry of lawsuits related to DEI, but not just at colleges and universities, at companies as well. One of those being the Fearless Fund, one of those being Hello Alice, both cases that we have covered throughout the year over at Inc. And then also heading into this year, basically was the escalation of those lawsuits, whether or not they settled, whether or not they continued, whether or not there was a ruling like we've continued to watch with both of those cases and many others. We also have very public attacks from folks like Robbie Starbuck, leveraged against big companies like Lowe's, Harley-Davidson, that have caused a lot of attention and worry among other companies too. Then you have the election. Then Trump's win puts even more fuel on the fire. That's a direct quote from David Glasgow, who I spoke with. He's at the NYU School of Law at the Meltzer Center there. Says that just caused even more anti-DEI action and empowerment really in that movement. So now here we are at the end of 2024, and we're already starting to see this changing environment play out at companies. DEI.
Yeah, they're not talking about it.
They're not talking about it. They're not hiring for it. DEI-related job postings have gone down. That's according to multiple reports over the year. Companies are changing their language around DEI. That's been really interesting to see play out, taking out words like diversity.
Universities are doing it too.
The Society for Human Resource Management took the word equity out of their DEI acronym, right? So that's a huge indication of where this could be going into 2025.
Are any of these companies doing that because it just should be part of how we think and just is? Or is it all backlash, do you think?
It seems to be backlash related, Christine, because they're not changing too much about their actual programs, according to a couple of the experts that I've spoken with. This just seems to be something that they hope will placate many of these anti-DEI activists so that they're not the next one to get a lawsuit, which whether or not that will play out would be interesting to see. But that seems to be their first line of defense. But even workers are becoming less enthusiastic about DEI. That came out in a recent Pew Research Center survey. So it's going to be really interesting to see where this goes from here. But this doesn't mean that companies have given up on DEI in general.
I think that we've been reporting, too, about a couple of instances where companies actually face litigation and are coming back stronger than ever. So it is exciting, and I'm kind of like on the edge of my seat, trying to figure out trying to see how it goes next, are they going to get embroiled in another lawsuit, and can they really be this confident heading into a Trump administration?
Right. Like a lot are just, I spoke to one expert who described it as going underground. They're just waiting out to see if this kind of energy around the anti-DEI movement will just kind of fizzle, and then they can start coming forward with their programs again.
Yeah, you've been doing a lot of reporting on the Fearless Fund in particular, and that's a nonprofit example of a nonprofit being implicated in a legal spat with DE&I issues. Where are they now? What's happening?
Yes, so I recently spoke with the co-founder of the Fearless Fund and Foundation, Arian Simone. And what's interesting is they settled their lawsuit in September, which from the outside might look like a loss. They are framing it as really a victory because this means that their DEI case did not go to the Supreme Court, did not create case law that was going to limit race-based funding moving forward.
For sure.
But now they have to decide how they're going to continue to operate. They have a number of portfolio companies, but even when I was speaking with Arian, she said, we're not starting another fund anytime soon. We're going to be waiting to see how this all plays out. Supporting our portfolio companies, absolutely. But right now, she just said there's so much political activity and also a pullback in DEI commitments that's making her hesitant in moving forward with certain plans.
Yeah. Meanwhile, if you look at the investment environment, you'll still see ESG-related companies doing really well in terms of being good attraction mechanisms for investors. The investor money is still there for these kinds of, environmentally friendly businesses and socially responsible businesses. Yet it's still a hard time if you're actually committed to diversity.
Yes. And it's interesting to see how this will all go, how the lawsuits will go. But also, we were talking about Gen Z earlier. Gen Z is very committed to diversity. That's come up in multiple surveys as well. So if these new younger workers are coming into companies with these values, it seems like there'd be no choice but to address them in some way.
Do you think we'll see a new wave of it? I mean, like, will it reform in some way?
When I was talking to Ariane Simone, she actually did mention that she believes it's a pendulum swing on DEI. It goes back and forth, back and forth. Right now, there's a lot of worries about this, but she expects that time again from now, there'll be reignited excitement.
I also wonder, just like, do you know what is the backlash about? Are there any specific objections, or is there something about the implementation of DEI or the practice of it that's not clicking with people or causing? Because you said, workers are also unhappy with it.
Right. So I mentioned David Glasgow before. He's at the Meltzer Center. They created a tracker basically looking at over 100 DEI cases. The most common are for these targeted programs that are supporting, let's say, in the case of the Fearless Fund, Black-owned businesses, right? Specific groups of either employees or founders for a fund. And basically these opponents are saying, you need to open this up for everyone. It can be under-resourced, it can be underprivileged, but to limit these kinds of programs is, they believe, illegal.
Strictly based on race.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm interested to see if, and I believe we will see, many of these companies not abandon these programs, but open up the qualifications for many of them to either avoid backlash or maybe just because they feel that there should be casting a wider net.
Is it just related to race, or is it more gender-focused? Is it any kind of seemingly unmeritocratic programming?
That's an interesting question. The cases I've seen, the cases that have certainly been getting most attention, I've been most closely watched, seem to be definitely related to race.
Yeah, I was wondering if, like, the gender would be the next shoe to fall.
Right.
I also wonder if, because I've seen a lot of this too, where I think there's the promise of DEI, which is we're going to create more equitable hiring. And then people find out, there's actually there's a lot of laws around hiring based on like race or ethnicity or protected characteristics. It is a challenge to hire a diverse workforce, and one that I think HR departments are not equipped to handle or are slow to adapt to, or hiring managers in general. And then I think there's also the realization, it goes back to the whole Gen Z manager burnout thing, is like, you have to support people once you hire them, or they're not successful. And then, unfortunately, if it's a person who, does identify as of a different race, it's sort of like they become sort of emblematic of the failed promise of it, which is totally unfair and not scientific. But I think there's a perception. It might just be part of the perception problem, right? Is sort of throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, that's really fascinating.
That's just my whiteboard,
I like it.
No,
it makes perfect sense.
And in DEI, the I for inclusion is why so many companies emphasize that once we have a diverse workforce, how do we keep it?
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to nurture this. So what are we excited about? What are we looking forward to? Obviously, this new year is going to have some good stuff. It's going to have some wild stuff and uncertain stuff. What's on your radar, Tim?
Oh, God.
That doesn't sound like overly optimistic.
Well, I mean, where to begin? I think crypto obviously is like having
the crypto
a new
scene.
moment. Yeah. People are excited about it again. Bitcoin's up. Doge is up. I foolishly
you're like the actual
like Dogecoin.
Crypto.
Yeah.
Okay.
The only reason I know I bring that up is because I did like experimentally like 5 years ago I bought I think $50 in Dogecoin.
Yeah.
It immediately devalued, so it's just been sitting in my Robinhood account for like years at -50. And then I noticed one day it skyrocketed back up to 50. I was like, well, I better get rid of it now before it crashes again. But here's the thing, crypto is not crashing yet. It's going back up.
Yeah. Bitcoin's like over 100,000 now.
Exactly.
Talk to your accountant about this, Tim. But
What she doesn't know can't hurt.
yeah,
either one of
I mean,
us.
I do think like that is, it's going to be in the news over and over and over again, whether it's new folks in Trump's
administration,
cabinet,
right.
the administration.
Yeah, we have Paul Atkins running SEC, and we have David Sachs, who's going to be the crypto and AI czar. David Sachs is a very, very well-known venture capitalist and
serial entrepreneur, right?
AI enthusiast.
Yeah, interesting. So, I mean, I would say like regulations to watch, but I don't know that they'll be putting in regulations. So
yeah, When you said Doge earlier, I thought you were talking about the Department of, like, what is it?
Government
efficiency.
I don't mean to say that with a tone, but I mean, I was kind of trying to put
That
it
was
in
a
air
tone.
quotes.
I heard the tone.
No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's going to be a lot. Folks need to be kind of tread carefully in the business world, like in these realms, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It will be a lot. And we will be very busy here at Inc.
Yeah.
For sure.
Let's hear everyone's takes on tariffs. What's going to happen?
Okay, the promise is that we're expecting broad-based tariff between 10 and 20% across the board on imports, and then plus 60% on Chinese-made goods.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's gonna rock a lot of businesses, especially in our orbit. But according to the stories that we've been writing and the companies that we've been talking to, if you have products that are made in America, you're happy right now. That's the flip of this coin, is that some businesses will do pretty well.
And there's certain industries that we've noted will be affected more than others. Agriculture, retail, manufacturing. I don't know if you've seen the news today, but toy makers are freaking out, and companies in general, if they're importing a lot of stuff, they are rushing right now to import things. So
people are stocking up.
Exactly. So I predict maybe even a warehouse boom could happen.
Oh, that's fascinating.
So get your warehouse now and import your toys now. I don't think tariffs are as a whole good. I think it's a purple state issue with a lot of nuances that people do not understand, because those costs are going to be passed on to the consumers. And a lot of the tariffs Trump put in place in his last administration, Biden's actually upheld and even added on to.
And they've been revenue drivers for the country.
Yep. But here's the thing. A lot of financial experts are freaking out. Like, they're very worried about this new set of promised tariffs. And they don't really see these ones as having the same beneficial effect.
Well, especially if they're broad-based. And the idea is that other countries might pursue their own tariffs against the United States. Here's an interesting fact. Small companies, about 1% of small companies actually engage in exporting traditionally. So this is probably a crisis for big businesses if we're thinking about reverse tariffs or retribution.
And when you think about that in the risk landscape, it sounds like a good opportunity for small businesses to help solve some of those problems. Like I mentioned warehouses, but if you are an importer or an exporter, a lot of companies are finding a workaround and they'll import basically to a country that doesn't have tariffs with the United States and then import again from that country. So it's a little more costly, but it's less than paying the tariff. So if you're a shipping and logistics,
what a nightmare for climate change. Let's move it to Mexico and then move it to the United States.
Exactly, which is why I say it's kind of like a purple issue, because the promise of tariffs is good for our economy, good for workers, good for jobs, better for the environment. But I think we can sort of see how, like, to your point, it won't have the effect. Like, no one right now can say exactly what will happen, and it will probably not have as many beneficial effects as Trump thinks it will, or as,
Right, yeah, he sort of sees it as this, it's a revenue driver for the country. He thinks that American, made and generated products and the companies that, produce them will do better. It'll be good for American innovation. That's interesting. Will it be good for American innovation?
Will it be good for American innovation? Let me think about that. I think it will be good for American innovation. I think the American entrepreneur is one that treats business and entrepreneurship as a way to solve problems. And in many cases, like, the problems that institutions or governments can't or won't solve. So I think for the savvy entrepreneur, pay attention to where the problems are. That comes out of this year of chaos or 4 years of chaos, and keepreadinginc.com for ways to...
Excellent evergreen advice there.
Yeah.
And Sarah, how about you? What are you watching?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of worth noting that entrepreneurs seem to be feeling really optimistic right now. That came out of my reporting this week. The NFIB's most recent survey, the first survey post-election, showed a huge breakthrough in optimism for small businesses.
I mean, small business owners are notoriously optimistic, though,
Indeed, but for the past almost 3 years, their optimism levels have been below the 50-year average. And this is the first time that this has broken through. And I think that that's really notable heading into next year. And so I think what I'm heartened about is if they're feeling so optimistic, that could lead to really interesting innovations and investments in their company heading into next year. So I think we could be coming up on a really interesting...
Oh, we're definitely coming up on an interesting environment for sure. How about New Year's resolutions? Do we have New Year's resolutions?
New Year's resolution.
Okay, so I'm going to eat better. Like, I think I'm going to eat less bread.
Less cereal.
More vegetables.
More vegetables. Salads.
Sure.
I'm doing it. Because I think I have, like, skin issues related to eating bread.
Okay.
Are you going to, like,
I have diagnosed myself.
Okay.
Are you going to do the RFK thing, like avoid seed oils and
I
like food
am
coloring
all on
and
board
fluoride? Yeah.
to the seed oil bandwagon.
Yeah.
Doing it.
I think part of my
Just kidding.
resolution is that I'm going to get my kids to eat healthier.
Oh, I mean, that's always my struggle.
I know, every day. But I think I'm going to like tweak my running goals a little, adjust it a little bit, lift more weights.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
You're going to be buff.
Well, I mean, hopefully I'll
In the
just
new
be
year.
like less frail. I don't know. That's what I'm going for. Sarah, what about you?
I'd like to get to 20 books on Goodreads. I think this year I'm at like 14, 15. The year before I was at 17. That was a pretty great year for me. I haven't cracked 20 and would love to.
Do you do audiobooks or just
Audiobooks. All that. I'm a big Audible. I need to multitask.
Do you consider yourself having read the book if you listen to one?
I do, because I don't tell people, oh, I listened to that. I just say I read it. And then if they have follow-up questions, I can tell them. But it's reading.
I mean, if you
I'm a defender of that. It's
Okay,
reading.
so you call it reading.
I call it reading.
All right.
if you're absorbing the information, yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get talked to all day, so I can't do audiobooks. But I think, I need to get back on my running goal. I haven't done a half marathon in a long time. I'd like to do one in the spring.
Well, the fact you've done one is impressive.
Like 7 years ago. I mean,
It counts.
it's been a while. I'd like to start training for that. You can all hold me accountable. Brooklyn Half, May 2025.
Absolutely. Maybe I'll sign up too. There we go.
Let's do it.
All right.
And then, I think also I went for a run this morning much earlier than I usually do in Prospect Park in Brooklyn, and it was really beautiful. And I just forgot, like, morning people are on a whole other level. They're living a whole other life.
We are wonderful.
I mean, I
No, you
walked past
are
people.
wonderful, but you are different.
We are unique.
But it looked fun. I mean, there's dogs off leash. There's people meditating, looking at swans. I'm like, this is where it's at. These people are onto something.
Wait, so is your resolution to become a morning person?
I've done it before, and I will do it again.
All right.
You
I
heard
love
it here
this.
first.
I love this.
Yeah.
Happy cheers to you, and good luck with your New Year's resolutions, everyone. Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
That's all for this episode of From the Ground Up.
Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice. Also, if you like this episode or have suggestions of what topics you'd like to hear about, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or reach out to us on Inc.'s social channels, on LinkedIn, Blue Sky, or Instagram.
From the Ground Up is produced by Mariam Kiparowitze and Avery Miles. Editing by Blake Odom. Mix and sound design by Nicholas Torres. Our executive producer is Josh Christensen. Our next season begins in February. We'll be featuring some really remarkable women founders to start our new season of From the Ground Up. So we'll see you next year. Oh, by the way, update on the world. As a reward after this appointment, I bought Solly a corn dog on the street in Lower Manhattan.
Is it gluten-free?
No, but it did cost $15 from a street vendor. And I was like, what the fuck?
No.
Yeah.
That is ridiculous.
I know. Don't even, I mean, I'm just, as a word of
Update
warning.
on the world.
I was like really, I was really like rushed. And I was like, here, get this. And I opened my wallet. There's $1. I was like, fuck. I was like, sir, do you take credit cards? Can I Venmo you? He's like, yeah, credit card, fine. Plus his machine. I was like, you know what? Since we're doing that, let me get this lemonade for him too. So the corn dog plus the lemonade.
Wow.
$15. And maybe I got charged up because it was a credit card situation.
Yeah.
It could have been a little, isn't that supposed to be like $3?
Yeah. So you still bought it because you had to.
I was invested at that point, and we were in such a hurry.
Because you can't say no at that point. Cause
Right, he's already got the
like,
corn dog in his
I
hands
want
with like
it.
ketchup on it. Like,
Yeah.
and like it was, of the things he wanted, that was probably the healthiest option that was like available. You know, he would have bought
you didn't
some.
want to get the churros?
Yeah, right. He would have wanted the Subway churros.
Hi, listeners. I'm Blake Odom, producer of From the Ground Up. Today, we have a special segment brought to you by Inc. in collaboration with our partners at Glenfiddich Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. This year at the Inc. 5000 Gala, Glenfiddich presented the inaugural Legacy Award to Stephen Marsh, founder of Smarsh. This award recognizes a trailblazer, an individual who has graced the Inc. 5000 list multiple times, embodying the spirit of innovation, boldness, and a relentless drive to defy the ordinary. Much like Glenfiddich, a brand that has pushed the boundaries of excellence throughout its 130-year history to become the world's most awarded single malt Scotch whiskey, Stephen Marsh exemplifies the courage and brilliance it takes to redefine industries and elevate the game. Inc. Editor-in-Chief Mike Hoffman spoke with Stephen Marsh about his remarkable journey, the legacy he has built, and the honor of being the first recipient of this award presented by Glenfiddich. Here's that captivating conversation. Enjoy and be inspired.
Hi, I'm Mike Hoffman, Editor-in-Chief of Inc., and I'm delighted to be here today with Steve Marsh, the founder of Smarsh, a multi-time Inc. 5000 honoree, and the recipient of the inaugural Inc. 5000 Legacy Award presented by Glenfiddich. So, Steve, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, Mike.
Oh, yeah, this is great. So let me get this straight. You've been on the Inc. 5000 list 17 times so far.
I think that's correct. I think 17 times.
We double-checked it. So you've been on the list 17 times, and how many years has the company been in business?
Since 2001, so about 23, I guess.
So you've been on the list more than you've not been on the list in the 23 years of your corporate life.
I think once we finally made the revenue threshold, we made the list and have been on it since.
Well, congratulations. It's amazing to make the Inc. 5000. It's amazing to make the Inc. 5000 a couple of times, and to make it 17 times puts you in really rare air. Only a few companies have made it more than 15 times, so congratulations. Now, you started the company in 2001, is that right?
That's right.
And your name is Steve Marsh, and the name of the company is Smarsh. Do I have it right that your original email address had something to do with the ultimate name of the company?
I incorporated to do consulting work, never thinking that the business name would see the light of day. It was just incorporated as Smarsh Inc. because Marsh was taken by the large insurance company, so we couldn't use that. My friends at the time my coworkers had all called me Smarsh because that was like my email handle. So I said, hey, let's just go with that. The domain name was available. And many years later, with a larger marketing department and more resources available to us, more domain names available to us, we still decided to keep the name Smarsh. But that should serve as proof that I never had intention of building this business into anything.
So who was your first client?
My first client was a small brokerage out of Boston, Massachusetts. And a friend of mine had worked there and had told me about this need to archive communications for regulatory compliance. And I knew virtually nothing. I mean, I knew absolutely nothing about that. I knew that I needed to make some money to pay rent and that I had some technology skills. So I set out to actually help them implement a solution that I thought I would source from another vendor, and quickly found that there weren't other vendors out there doing this, at least to service the small and mid-sized companies. The business at that point pivoted from being a consulting business to being the archiving and communications intelligence business that it's become today.
When you started on the hockey stick-like trajectory of growth, what was the sort of first moment, if you remember, where you kind of knew, oh, this is like not just a consulting business, this is a real business, a technology business, and actually it's a fast-growth technology business?
One moment that comes to mind is, we had a large competitor in an adjacent space. They weren't archiving the way we were. They did data backup or something. And they made an offer to buy the company really in our first year of effort in trying to sell, the archiving service. And it was hard as a founder to turn down, I think it was like $1 million, but it was complicated, but we passed on it. And that was a great decision. But that really validated for me that we had built something that was at least perceived to be of value to someone else. And of course, making the Inc. 5000 list for the first time after applying earlier that year and not being able to apply the year prior to that because we weren't big enough. We didn't meet the revenue thresholds. Anyway, when we made that list, that was fantastic validation for all the hard work that we had done. It gave us a sense of credibility when we would go out to our customers by being able to put the Inc. 5000 recipient logo on our emails and on our website. And that actually helped us grow to the next level beyond that.
And you at some point took growth capital, private equity, is that right?
We did. It wasn't until 2007. First investors were minority investors in 2007. And ironically, the point at which they became interested was a point at which we no longer needed money. And I think many founders probably go through this. When you're trying to raise money, it's a lot harder than when you don't need it. When you don't need it, everybody seems to come out of the woodwork, and then they try to convince you why you should take money. I think that was a key moment where we realized we needed to significantly upgrade our technology infrastructure if we wanted to win bigger and bigger customers. We were making incremental changes every year. The rip and replace that you hear technology companies go through, where every 6 months or so we were taking out old equipment and replacing it with new, bigger and better equipment. And that really just wasn't scalable. It was becoming a distraction to have to keep going through those projects every 6 months or so. By raising capital, we were able to get off that hamster wheel, and we were also able to start making some acquisitions. It became a part of life from that moment forward.
What did you learn about business ownership and business leadership going through the process of acquisitions?
We gained access to people who had operated at the level beyond where we were, which is a pattern we'll see occur over and over in our business. But there were smarter people who had more experience in a variety of areas, and they presented some of the reasons why we would want to do some acquisitions. They also educated me and the rest of my team on how to do them. But it taught me that there are a variety of ways to help grow the business. You probably don't want to grow your business just doing acquisitions, although that does create value for a lot of companies. But for us, it was a combination of organic growth through innovation and product development and serving our customers with different products and services, and making some of these acquisitions to bring in new technology, to bring in additional competitors, to bring in more expertise than we otherwise would possess. And today that trend continues. We're trying to bring in more AI expertise, for example. We might look to do an acquisition there.
Can I ask, where are you guys at revenue now?
We are about $500 million.
And what's the fastest growth part of the company right now?
There's a lot of focus on leveraging the data that we have stored on behalf of our customers. So if you think about the initial use case, for those that don't know, is that we help customers by storing their electronic communications so that they can meet regulatory requirements. You have to have this stuff. You have to be able to produce it. That's kind of the baseline service. But what we've found is that over the years, you start to amass more and more really valuable information on behalf of our customers. So we have years and years worth of emails, text messages, Zoom calls, whatever it may be. In a world where artificial intelligence is taking over and people are trying to find ways to harness the value of data, we're sitting on what we think is one of the biggest gold mines out there in terms of data. It's employee communications that were captured initially for a different reason, but now can be turned into sales opportunities, customer service opportunities, new product ideas. I think we're seeing a lot of growth.
So an archive can become a large language model.
Yeah.
So this is obviously the Inc. 5000 Legacy Award brought to you by Glenfiddich. As you think about the legacy of the company and your legacy as a founder, what do you still hope for? What is your idea of what the legacy you want to leave is?
We have a very unique culture, I think one that reflects what I wanted to create many, many years ago. I want it to be an organization that, hopefully my kids one day look back on and say, wow, Dad must have built something pretty interesting here. It's still around. It's still relevant. Our customers still find value in what we're doing. I just want to see it reach its maximum potential. Not every company, not every company that is started or that I'm involved in or that I invest in has the same opportunity to persist through time. Some companies are better as a short-term product that maybe gets sold to someone else and they integrate the technologies. Some technologies have a shorter lifespan where maybe it's 2 to 3 years and then you have to move on. This is a business that I believe truly has the opportunity to exist for many, many years and to be relevant by just listening to customers and adapting and finding or addressing use cases that we found many years ago.
Steve Marsh, the founder of Smarsh, a $500 million company founded in a Brooklyn apartment that's been on the Inc. 5000 list 17 times. Thanks so much for joining us today.
No, thanks for having me.
And before I let you go, we have these glasses of Glenfiddich here. You are the inaugural recipient of the Inc. 5000 Legacy Award presented by Glenfiddich. So let's cheers to your success.
Cheers.
Congratulations again to Stephen Marsh. And I couldn't end this episode without getting a little taste of Glenfiddich myself. And since I got a bottle right here, cheers to you listeners with Glenfiddich, the world's most awarded single malt Scotch whiskey. Drink responsibly. Glenfiddich Single Malt Scotch Whiskey is copyrighted 2024 and imported by William Grant & Sons, Inc., New York, New York.